Adana Okoye was everything a modern Nigerian woman aspired to be. A 29-year-old successful architect living in the heart of Lekki, Lagos, she had carved a name for herself in a male-dominated industry. She had a sleek apartment that overlooked the Atlantic Ocean, a pearl-white Mercedes-Benz, and an Instagram feed filled with travel, work, and elegance. But there was one thing missing: love. After several failed relationships, one who cheated, another who fled with her money, and one who disappeared without a trace, Adana had decided to stop searching. She buried herself in work and closed her heart to romance. That was until she met Obinna. She met him one quiet Sunday afternoon at a charity art exhibition in Victoria Island. He stood by a large oil painting of a forest shrine, his posture tall and calm, like someone who didn't belong in this world. Obinna was striking, tall, dark, and devastatingly handsome. His voice was deep, his Yoruba laced with an Igbo undertone that hinted at Eastern roots. His eyes were the most curious part: grey. Not contact lens grey, but naturally misty grey, like smoke trapped in glass. Adana found herself staring longer than she should have. He approached her first. "I see the painting caught your attention," he said. "I think the painting is staring back at me," she responded, half joking. He smiled gently. That's how spirits communicate, with the ones who still remember them. She tilted her head. "That's a strange thing to say at a Lagos art show." "You'd be surprised how many spirits walk among us," he replied with a calmness that made her feel like he wasn't joking. They spent the rest of the exhibition talking. He said he was a historian, interested in lost Igbo heritage and spiritual practices. He had just returned to Lagos after years of research abroad. That night, Adana couldn't sleep. Obinna called the next day. Then the next. And again. Within 3 weeks, they were inseparable. He never spoke much about his past, only that he was the last child of a royal lineage from a remote village in Abia State called Umualechi. It wasn't on Google Maps, but he swore it existed. "I'll take you there someday," he promised, tracing her cheek with his fingers. "But only when you're ready." After 4 months, he proposed. It was sudden, intense, passionate, and Adana said yes. Her friends were skeptical. Her mother was cautious. But Adana was in love, and Obinna made her feel safe. They planned a small traditional wedding to be held in Umualechi. He insisted. "It's where my ancestors are," he said. "It's important to marry before them." Adana agreed, though something felt odd. When she told her mother about the village, Mama Adana froze. "Umualechi," her mother whispered. "That place doesn't exist anymore. It was abandoned decades ago. People say it was cursed." Adana laughed it off. "Mummy, every old village in Nigeria is either cursed or haunted." But her mother wasn't smiling. "Don't go there, Adana." She ignored the warning. On the day of their traditional wedding, she traveled to Umualechi with Obinna. The road was long, dusty, and isolated. After several hours and countless wrong turns, they reached it. But the village was nothing like she expected. It was quiet, too quiet. No children. No chickens. No laughter. The air was cold, and the trees were so tall they blocked out the sun. The houses were ancient, built with clay and worn-out thatch. And yet, the people there smiled at her with warmth. They treated her like royalty. The wedding took place that evening in a sacred grove behind the village. It was unlike any wedding she'd seen. No loud music. No MCS. Just chants, fires, and strange markings on her skin that glowed in the moonlight. When she looked into Obinna's eyes during the vows, she swore they changed, momentarily, into something darker. Something ancient. But she dismissed it. That night, they consummated the marriage in a cold, candlelit hut. Obinna's body was warm, but his touch sent chills down her spine. The next morning, he was gone. No clothes. No footprints. No goodbye. She ran out of the hut, confused, only to find the village empty. Every hut was abandoned. No smoke. No people. Just silence and wind. Adana screamed his name. Again and again. No answer. As panic set in, she ran to the village square and collapsed. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her Lekki apartment. Alone. In her wedding attire. Covered in dust. Her phone showed it had been 2 days. And there was no record of Umualechi anywhere. Not on Google. Not on her GPS history. Nothing. Had she imagined it all? But then, her doorbell rang. When she opened the door, a small wooden box sat on her doorstep. Inside was a blood-red bead bracelet. And a note. You are now bound to him, body and soul. Whether in this world or the next. Adana's hands trembled. Her wedding finger began to burn. Obinna had vanished, but something else had come back with her. And whatever it was, it had only just begun. Adana didn't leave her apartment for 3 days. She sat on the floor of her living room, staring at the blood-red bead bracelet now resting silently on her center table. It no longer looked like an ordinary piece of jewelry, it pulsed faintly, as though something within it was alive. She had tried throwing it away, flushing it, even setting it on fire. But each time, it reappeared. Sometimes on her pillow. Sometimes clutched in her hand when she woke up. Once, horrifyingly, it had wrapped itself tightly around her ankle while she showered. It was no longer a question of belief. Something unexplainable had happened in Umualechi. And now, something unexplainable was following her home. Her phone rang, it was Ngozi, her best friend and a lawyer. You've ghosted everyone for days. I'm coming over, Ngozi said, not waiting for permission. 20 minutes later, she was in the apartment, arms folded, eyes narrowed. You're pale. What's going on? And where's that man you ran off to marry? Adana hesitated, then told her everything, from the strange village to the empty huts to waking up mysteriously in her apartment. She showed her the bracelet. Ngozi scoffed. You probably fell asleep in your car and dreamt the entire thing. You've been under too much pressure. Adana grabbed her friend's hand. Ngozi, I know what I saw. That village wasn't a dream. I touched things. I felt things. Obinna was real. You mean is real? Adana's eyes dropped. I don't know if he ever truly lived. Later that night, Ngozi decided to sleep over. Just to be safe. At 3:27 a.m., Adana woke up with a jolt. The room was freezing. She could see her breath. And then, she heard it. A soft whisper. Her name. Adana. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the room. Ngozi was fast asleep on the couch. But the whisper was coming from behind the full-length mirror on the far wall. Adana, trembling, got up and approached it slowly. The mirror began to fog from the inside. And then, letters began to etch themselves onto the glass. You're not alone anymore. She screamed. Ngozi woke up instantly, alarmed, but by the time she reached her, the mirror was clear again. No fog. No writing. Are you okay? Ngozi asked, clearly shaken. Adana looked at her with wild eyes. It was here. He was here. They barely slept that night. The next morning, they visited a spiritualist in Ikoyi. An old blind man called Baba Okazi, who was rumored to have once helped solve a missing persons case the police gave up on. The man held the bead bracelet in his wrinkled hands for less than 10 seconds before dropping it like it burned him. He turned his white eyes to Adana and said quietly, This is not a wedding bead. This is a binding token. You didn't marry a man. You married a wandering spirit, one that seeks permanence in the human world. Through you. Adana felt faint. What does that mean? Ngozi asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It means, Baba Okazi said slowly, that she is no longer fully human. Something ancient now walks beside her. It wears the memory of a man she loved, but it is not him. It has always been watching, and it chose her for a reason. Adana's knees buckled. Ngozi caught her. The old man wasn't finished. Have you seen changes in the mirror? He asked. Adana nodded slowly. He frowned. Avoid mirrors at night. They are his gateway. Then he gave her something, a small calabash sealed with black wax and red thread. When you begin to see him fully, not just in mirrors, this must be broken and poured at a crossroad by midnight. It will give you a window, one chance, to banish him. But be warned. Banishing a spirit that has claimed a bride will not be easy. He will resist. And he will fight. On the ride back home, Adana sat in silence, holding the calabash tightly. That night, she locked every mirror in her house under cloth. But the shadows had grown bolder. Her light bulbs began to flicker. Her fridge began to leak blood-red liquid. Her TV turned on by itself, showing static, until the static formed a familiar face. Obinna. He smiled from inside the screen and whispered. You are mine. And soon, you will remember who you truly are. Adana collapsed, screaming. The next morning, Ngozi found her unconscious on the floor. And on the wall behind her, written in blood, were the words. You are no longer Adana Okoye. Adana awoke in the hospital, the bright white ceiling blurring into view. Her head pounded and her limbs felt like lead. Ngozi sat beside her, eyes puffy from crying but alert with concern. You fainted, Ngozi said, softly. I called an ambulance. You were burning with fever. Adana's lips were dry. The wall. It had words. Blood. Ngozi nodded. I saw them. And I took pictures before they vanished. Adana's breath caught. They vanished. 5 minutes after you passed out. I swear on everything, one moment the words were there, and the next, the wall was clean. The doctor entered, a kind-looking woman in her 40s. She'd run several tests and found nothing unusual. No infections, no brain injury, no fever anymore. It could be psychological, she said gently. Stress, trauma. Sometimes the mind creates what it cannot understand. But Adana knew better. This wasn't her mind playing tricks. That evening, after she was discharged, she begged Ngozi to take her somewhere no one would think to look, her late grandmother's house in Soyulia, locked up for years since Mama Nkechi passed. Ngozi reluctantly agreed. They cleaned the dusty bungalow, padlocked the gate, and settled in for the night. No mirrors. No electronics. Just oil lamps and old prayers whispered into the walls. But rest did not come. In her sleep, Adana dreamed vividly, too vividly. She was back in Umualechi, dressed in white, surrounded by hooded figures chanting in a forgotten language. At the center of the grove was Obinna, but his face was not his. His skin cracked like old bark. His eyes were now burning black coals, and his voice echoed like thunder through a cave. He reached out to her and said, Do you remember now? You were always mine. Long before this life. Then the hooded figures began to chant in unison. She is the bride returned. The spirit shall remain. She screamed herself awake. Ngozi came running. What did you see? Adana, breathing hard, said, I think I've been here before. Not in this life. But another. I think. I was chosen long ago. The next morning, they drove to her hometown in Anambra State to visit the only person Adana believed could hold the key to her unraveling life, her father's older sister, Auntie Nena. A reserved woman, deeply spiritual, who once told Adana at age 10, "Spirits mark those who carry ancient blood. Be careful what marks you." Auntie Nena welcomed them with a strange calmness. When Adana recounted everything, Nena grew quiet. She stood, walked into a back room, and returned with a worn leather-bound box. From it, she brought out a faded black and white photograph. Adana gasped. The woman in the picture looked exactly like her, same nose, same eyes, same posture. But the photograph was clearly decades old. "That's Onyinyekai," Auntie Nena said. "Your great-grandmother's sister. You never knew her." Adana stared in disbelief. "She looks like me." "Because she was you," Nena said. "In another time." Adana's blood ran cold. Onyinyekai was born in 1901. Beautiful. Intelligent. But strange things followed her. She claimed to be married to a man no one ever saw, said he came only in dreams. One night, she vanished. And in her place, a note was found: "He has come to collect what was his. I belong to him in every life." Ngozi choked back a gasp. "She was never found again," Auntie Nena continued. But a few people claimed they saw her, decades later, in the old village of Umualechi. Wearing white. Smiling. As though she never left. Adana stood up, trembling. "He doesn't just want me. He wants all of me. My blood. My soul. My lineage." Nena leaned closer. "Some spirits don't forget. Especially those who were once betrayed." Adana's heart raced. "What do you mean, betrayed?" "There is a legend in Umualechi," she said. "A warrior who was promised a bride by her family in return for saving their village. The bride fled, and the spirit was cursed to wander forever. Until he could reclaim her soul in another life." Ngozi whispered, "Obinna." Adana nodded, numb. "He found me again. And this time, he married me." Just then, the wind outside roared, slamming a shutter open. They turned toward the window. A man stood across the street. He wore a dark native wrapper, bare-chested, with a single red bead necklace glowing faintly against his skin. "Obinna." He raised his hand slowly in greeting. And then he was gone. Adana collapsed into tears. "He's no longer waiting," she whispered. "He's here. In this world. And he's coming for me." For the next 48 hours, Adana did not sleep. She sat by the window of her great-aunt's house, watching the road, waiting for Obinna to reappear. But he never showed. The only sign of him was the faint scent of udu leaf that lingered in the air, earthy, ancient, unsettling. Ngozi begged her to return to Lagos. "We can go to a church, a real prophet, someone who knows how to cast this thing out. There are deliverance ministries." Adana shook her head. "No. This is older than any pastor. It's not just spiritual warfare. It's ancestral." Auntie Nena agreed. "The churches deal with demons. This is not a demon. This is a spirit husband bound by ancient tradition. One that believes it was wronged and has crossed time to reclaim his bride." That night, Adana went through the old family chest Nena kept. Among the artifacts was a brittle journal belonging to Onyinyekai, her great-grandaunt. She opened it carefully, flipping through pages filled with haunting poetry and drawings of a faceless man. And then, toward the back, a note written in shaky ink. "He waits for me in every life. I once fled, but I was found again. He will come through water, through dreams, through mirrors. I married him in the grove of Umualechi. If you are reading this, then he has returned for you, too. Break the circle. Return to the grove. Or he will never stop. Onyinyekai, 1925. Adana's hands trembled. He wants me to return, she whispered. To Umualechi. To finish something that was never completed. But you already had the wedding, Ngozi said. Not his wedding, Nena corrected. Only the binding. The first rite. The second rite makes it permanent. That's why he hasn't fully taken you. That's why you still exist in this world. Ngozi stood up. So you're saying if he completes this second rite, she'll vanish like Onyinyekai? Her body will remain, Nena said quietly. But her soul will belong elsewhere. Adana felt sick. I'm going back to Umualechi. Ngozi grabbed her arm. Are you mad? That place doesn't exist anymore. I have to find it, she said. Or he'll find me. And then came the worst sign of all. That night, Adana's reflection stopped copying her. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her aunt's house, brushing her hair. And her reflection, Adana's exact image, put the brush down and smiled at her. But Adana hadn't smiled. She froze. Her throat tightened. The reflection slowly raised its hand and placed a red bead over its neck. Adana stepped back in horror. Then the mirror cracked, silently, from edge to edge. Ngozi rushed in. What happened? Adana could barely speak. He's inside me already. She pulled the calabash Baba Okazi had given her from her bag. It's time, she said. They drove deep into the night, searching for the forgotten path to Umualechi. It didn't show on maps. But Adana followed instinct and her dreams. At 11:47 p.m., they reached a forest path with ancient pillars carved with symbols. Ngozi stopped the car. This is madness, she said. You can't go alone. You can't follow me, Adana replied, gripping the sealed calabash. Only bloodbound can enter the final rite. And then the forest opened. Not physically, but spiritually. One moment, she stood at the edge of darkness. The next, she was inside Umualechi again, except this time, it wasn't abandoned. Torches flickered. People moved in slow, dreamlike rhythm, all wearing white. Drums beat softly in the distance. She walked forward, drawn toward the sacred grove where it had all begun. Obinna was waiting at the center, dressed in the same dark native cloth. His eyes were no longer coal-black, they shimmered with ancient sadness. I've waited 3 lifetimes, he said. Don't run this time. Adana raised the calabash. I didn't run. You chased me across time. You bound me. He stepped closer. You made a promise once. Before this life. You stood before my shrine and vowed never to betray me. I was a child. In another time. I didn't know. You knew enough to flee, he said quietly. And then he raised his hand, and the ground around them began to crackle with fire and wind. Figures appeared from the woods, all brides, spirits of women like her, Onyinyekai among them, their eyes hollow but glowing. Adana's skin burned. Her vision blurred. Obinna reached out, whispering, Say the vow. Complete the rite. Or be torn between worlds forever. She screamed, and smashed the calabash on the ground. A burst of light erupted. The spirits shrieked. Obinna's face twisted in pain. His body cracked, first his arms, then his chest, until his entire form shattered like glass. The grove shook violently. Adana was flung backward. Everything went dark. She awoke at the crossroads where the journey had begun. It was 3:33 a.m. Ngozi sat beside her, crying. You disappeared for almost 2 hours. I thought I lost you. Adana sat up, weak. Did it work? And then she saw it. The red bead bracelet, now cracked and blackened, lay beside her on the ground. Obinna was gone. But the final words of Onyanyakai's journal echoed in her head. He will return again. The binding is broken, not the curse. 3 weeks had passed since the calabash was broken. 3 peaceful, uneventful weeks. Adana had returned to Lagos. She started working again, redesigned her apartment to feel brighter, and even began therapy. For the first time in months, she felt in control, awake, grounded, safe. The cracked red bead had been buried at a church altar in the outskirts of town, far from the mirrors, the whispers, the spirit world. But peace in stories like hers is never permanent. It began with a dream. In it, she was back in the grove, wearing black this time. The sky above was blood red, and a small child stood in the center of the circle where the rites had taken place. A girl, no older than 6, with grey eyes and skin pale as dust. The child looked up at her and said in a hollow voice, "You ended the wedding. But the spirit found a new path." Adana jolted awake, drenched in sweat. She called Ngozi immediately. "I think he's coming back. Through someone else." Ngozi, exhausted and half asleep, didn't take it seriously. "Maybe it's just fear playing tricks. You've been through a lot." But Adana knew better. Something wasn't right. Later that morning, she began noticing other signs: cold spots in her office, lights flickering when she walked by, even people commenting on how strange her presence felt. And then she got a call from Auntie Nena. Her voice was trembling. "Adana, I had a vision last night. The grove is bleeding. The spirits are not at rest. You must come back. Not to Umualechi. But deeper, beyond it." Adana packed her things immediately and boarded a night bus to Anambra. But when she arrived at the village, Nena was gone. Not dead, just gone. Her neighbors said she'd walked into the forest before dawn and never returned. And in her room, scratched into the wood of her wardrobe, were the words, "He walks in a new form." Adana sat on the floor and wept. The curse wasn't over. It had evolved. Later that day, she received an email from a blocked sender. No subject. No text. Just an attached image. She opened it. It was a sonogram, a pregnancy scan. Her heart stopped. Below it, a handwritten note. "Our child must be born in the grove. He is the key." Adana dropped the phone. Was someone playing a cruel joke? Or was it her scan? The next day, she took a test. Positive. But how? She hadn't been with anyone, not since Obinna. And that night in the forest grove was a blur. Ngozi flew down to meet her immediately. "This isn't possible," she whispered, staring at the test strip. Adana's hand was shaking. "What if the rite was never meant to bind me, but to plant something inside me? A vessel." Ngozi's face drained of color. A child born between 2 worlds. Adana nodded slowly. "He found another way. Through the bloodline. If he can't keep me, he'll be reborn through me." That night, Adana began bleeding. She was rushed to a nearby clinic. The doctor confirmed that the pregnancy was still intact, but strange, the heartbeat was echoing, doubling, and the embryo pulsed like it was responding to sound. The scan showed something disturbing. Behind the child's form, in the womb, there was a shadow. Not a mass. Not tissue. A silhouette. And when they amplified the audio of the heartbeat, the sound wasn't right. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was a voice. Whispering her name. Ada. Nah. The doctor fainted. Adana ran. Outside the clinic, the trees bent toward her. A crow landed on the roof and cawed, 3 times. And the wind brought the scent again, udu leaf and blood. She fell to her knees and screamed, "What do you want from me?" And from the silence came a voice, deep, and all around her. To be born. To be whole. Through your womb, I will return. Adana stood and looked up at the night sky. She had two choices. Let the spirit child come into the world. Or return to the grove for one final confrontation. One that would cost her more than she had ever imagined. Adana returned to Lagos for 3 days, not to rest, but to prepare. She didn't tell Ngozi where she was going, only left her a note. If I don't return, know that I loved you like a sister. If I do return, I may not come back the same. Inside her handbag, she packed only 3 things. The broken bead bracelet, now blackened. A blade made of cold iron, blessed by an old dibia she met in Rai. And the sonogram. A reminder of what now grew inside her. On the 4th night, she left before midnight. Alone. She made her way back to the now legendary grove at the heart of Umualechi, following the same path her dreams had been whispering for weeks. The winds howled like warning cries, and the trees bent as if grieving her return. But Adana walked with steady feet. She arrived at the grove just after 2 a.m. The air was thick, too thick, like she had stepped underwater. The moon hung blood-red, casting a surreal glow over the sacred land. And he was there. Obinna. No longer a spirit pretending to be a man. His true form stood before her, towering, robed in shadows, crowned with thorns made of bone. His eyes were twin voids, and his voice was now many voices, layered and terrifying. But when he spoke, she still heard the Obinna she had once loved. You returned. You understand now. Adana nodded slowly. You want to be born. I want to finish what was started. You made a vow to me, many lives ago. They cut you away from me. But I waited. I watched. And now. Through your womb, I will enter again. Adana stepped forward, her voice steady. You took my peace. You took my blood. You tried to take my soul. But you will not take my child. He laughed, an echoing, thunderous sound that made the very earth vibrate. The spirits of the grove circled her, wailing softly, women from every lifetime he had bound, watching, weeping. This child is not yours alone, he said. He is the bridge between worlds. Once born, the gate will open. The living and the dead will walk side by side. That is the legacy you carry. Adana removed the blade. Then I will break that legacy tonight. The moment the blade touched the ground, the grove reacted. Flames burst in a ring around them. The spirits shrieked. The trees began to bleed sap as dark as midnight. Obinna growled. You would sacrifice your blood to defy me. Adana's voice cracked, but her eyes blazed. I'm not your bride. I'm your end. She raised the blade and plunged it into her palm, letting her blood drip into the cracked earth. It sizzled as it touched the soil, ancient magic reacting to ancient betrayal. Then she took the broken bead and cast it into the flames. The fire screamed. Obinna lunged, but the spirits held him back. Not out of loyalty, but vengeance. One by one, they clawed at him, revealing his true face, burning, weeping, bound in chains made of oaths. Adana fell to her knees, her blood mixing with ash. She whispered the final words from Onyenyekai's journal. Let what was stolen be reclaimed. Let what was bound be broken. Spirit, return to the void. Bride, return to the living. A storm of light exploded from the earth. Obinna roared in agony, ripped into smoke, flame, and fragments of memory. The grove trembled. The spirits rose, free at last, dissolving into wind. And then silence. Adana awoke at dawn. She was alone. The grove was empty, quiet, peaceful. The bead bracelet was gone. Her womb no longer pulsed unnaturally. The child remained, but no longer carried the weight of the dead. She stumbled back through the forest, barefoot, bruised, and exhausted. Waiting at the edge of the road was Ngozi, tears pouring down her cheeks. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. Adana collapsed into her arms. 6 months later, Adana gave birth to a healthy baby boy. His eyes were brown, not grey. His cry was sharp, loud, and entirely human. She named him Chinazek Pir, God answers prayers. She moved out of Lagos, bought a house by a quiet river, and started a new life, one of peace, healing, and faith. But every year, on the anniversary of her wedding to the spirit, she lights a candle at midnight. She places it by the mirror. And she whispers, "I broke the circle, but I will always remember. And I will never let you return." The flame flickers in the glass. But it never answers.